cold, and shortly they were a-talking. Your future, I will tell to you. Your future you often have asked me. Your true love will die by your own right hand. Then crazy man Michael will curse it free.
Hey everybody, this is Tom Mitchell, the Highland Traveler. Welcome to the Enchanted Forest. I'm on location at the spot where I photographed my Enchanted Forest series, photographing again this fall. It's absolutely beautiful, just a spectacular area to photograph in. It's a lot more popular now. When I was here, I think that was 2016, 2017, something like that, I can't remember now. There was nobody around, and now it's just families, people doing portraits, and people stopping. It was hard to find a parking spot. So it's on the Alpine Loop Road, out towards Cascade Springs. I've done some videos recently about photographing in the fall, and I thought I'd do a video about how to edit your photographs. So first thing I want to talk about is histogram. I've mentioned this before, but I haven't really gone into a whole lot of detail about histogram. So let's show you about histogram first. So this is the scene I'm photographing right here. I've got my 70 to 200 on, and I'm probably somewhere in the 80 to 100 range. Let me show you what I just got. So here's the photograph I just took, and here's my histogram. So what is a histogram? This is a digital representation of what your photograph looks like. So the left point is the darks and the right point is the highlights, and having it towards the center, two separate points like that are fine, but having it towards the center is best. So watch what happens if I shoot my exposure, if I make my exposure longer. Now you see it's quite washed out, and look at the histogram, how far over to the right it is. Now watch if I underexpose it. So you can see on my meter right there, that's the normal exposure at f11. I'm focus stacking these. So let's underexpose it by 2 full stops. And you see how dark it is, and see how the histogram is way over there on the left. And the blacks are starting to clip. So in a nutshell, that's histogram. It's not only important to watch your histogram while you're photographing, but it's also really important to watch it while you're editing. When you go in and start tweaking the highlights, the shadows, and even the color and saturation, anything, it will change the histogram, and so you have to watch that. So I'm going to keep shooting here while I've still got some light, and then I'm going to take you back into my studio and show you how I'm going to edit one of these photographs. So stay tuned.
Michael he ranted, and Michael he raved, and he beat at the wings with his fists. So he laughed and he cried, he shouted and he swore, for his mad mind had trapped him with a kiss. Oh, you speak with an evil, you speak with a hate, you speak for the devil that haunts me. For is she not the fairest in all the broad lands? Your thoughts are as words are to taunt me. Took out his dagger, a firebrand of steel, and he struck down the raven through the heart. Oh, where the bird fluttered long and the sky it did spin, and the cold earth did wander and startle. Oh, where is the raven that I struck down dead, that here should lie on the ground now? I see but my true love with wounds so red, and her lover's heart it did pound so. Talks to the night and the day, oh, but his eyes, they are sane, and his speech, it is plain, and he longs to be far away, oh. Well, Michael, he whistles the simplest of tunes, and asks the wild winds their pardon, for his true love has flown into every flower grown, and he must be keeper of the garden.
That is some tall grass. So here I am back in my studio. It's been a crazy last couple weeks out just photographing a ton. I've had a lot of fun. I love fall. It's my favorite time of year. So I'm going to edit one of the photographs I took in the Enchanted Forest from start to finish, show you how I use Lightroom and Photoshop, and we're going to talk some more about histogram and how important it is while you're editing. Alright, so here I am in Lightroom. If you don't have Adobe Photoshop and Lightroom or something that's equivalent that's really nice, you should, because it makes a big difference with everything. So this is the image that I'm going to edit. This is actually, I shot multiple images of it, starting right here to here, and I stacked them. I'm not going to go into detail about how to do that. I focused on different areas throughout the image so that the whole image would be sharp. So if I blow this up to 100%, that background is a little soft. The tree right here, the main subject, the trunk of it is nice and sharp. But I shot this at f8. You can see my exposure settings up here. ISO 64, 170 millimeter on my 70 to 200, f8 at 2.5 seconds. And I wanted to have a shallow depth of field at 8 so I could focus stack that and get everything sharper. So the actual image that I've worked on is a ton better. But I'm going to show you how to do this. So in the library, click on Develop, and then you have sliders over here. You can adjust the color temperature if you want. This is I shot this on just daylight. I just set my camera on daylight and then adjusted afterwards. And I could warm this up just a little bit, not much. I'm not going to do too much. See, if I go extremes, you see how yellow it gets. And if I go down the other way, it gets really blue. You can go back and just, it'll gray out when you hit the right spot. But I'm gonna warm it up just a little bit. The biggest thing I'm going to do with this, looking at the histogram, you see how it is a little bit off to the left, the whole histogram. I'm going to bump the exposure up a little bit, and notice how the histogram is moving up as I do that. So that right there is almost 3/4 of a whole exposure brought up to 0.045. Then I'm going to adjust, which I like doing a lot, I'm going to adjust the dehaze. You can really crank it and see how that just blows it out. I'm going to it just is overkill. I'm going to bring it back and stick it somewhere around 20. That's 25, 26. I like that. Now zoom in and look, I'm not getting any clipping yet in my shadows. I've got this set to show clipping up here on the left. You can click it, turn it on. I've got them both turned on, meaning the highlights and the shadows. When there's a little box around there, it'll show you. So watch, if I bring this black sway down, though, that blue in Lightroom is showing me everything that's clipping for the shadows. So I can bump that back up to where I no longer have clipping. And in the dehaze, which I'm a fan of, I really like it. If I crank it up really high extreme, then it'll show the clipping in the shadows. If I back it off, you see how just blasé it gets. So I like it around 26 on this. Then, and always be watching your histogram. The histogram is everything. So I also could bring up the highlights if I want. So I've just brought the highlights up 100%. That's only bringing up just the highlights. There it is down. So that's -16. There's +12. I'm gonna put it at about 20. That's at 21. You can bring up the shadows if you want, or take them down. See, if I bring them down, it gets nice and dark in the background. This is a pretty good exposure all the way around on this. Just needing to bump it up a little bit helped. And as I was saying, the blacks, if I wanted to bring the blacks up or down, I could. But you're gonna get clipping if you bring them down too much. I'm gonna keep it right around 0. I'm gonna put it back at 0. The other thing I like to do is get really crazy with the vibrance and the saturation. So what do you think of that? No. I saw something on Facebook recently, or somebody posted, isn't it funny how this time of year everybody cranks the sliders up on the saturation? And it's true. I usually only bring it up just a couple, like 2 to 3, and the saturation, you know, on the vibrance, and maybe the saturation up just like double that, 4 or 5. So let me show you what I've done. So over here on the left, you've got history. If I go to import, that's what the raw file looks like. That's what it looks like shot from my camera. Here's where I brought the exposure up to 0.26, and it tells you right there, you know, so that's almost 1/4 of a stop up. And then here's where I adjusted the highlights up, crazy with the whites. I mean, this is all the history. So here's where I brought the dehaze back down, and then this is where I brought up the vibrance and the saturation. Here's my final vibrance and saturation. So you see, there is very little difference. It just barely makes a difference with what I did. You don't want to overdo the vibrance and the saturation. So here's the original raw image, and here is after editing it. So I like that. That's nice. There's some things here that I really need to fix in Photoshop. Specifically, that grass in the foreground that is closer to my camera and is blurry and out of focus. That bugs me. Always do edge patrol or border patrol and remove things that you don't like. That's fine to do that. So I could open this up in Photoshop, just go edit in Photoshop. So here it is in Photoshop. The other way, if you want to just save it at that point and come back later and work on it, is right click and then go to export, select export, and then select where you want it to go. In this case, it's the eDrive 2022 Fall Colors 3, because I've been 3 photo shoots this year in the fall, and then the working on, and make sure that you've got it set on the various stuff like format. You want to edit in TIFF. Always edit in TIFF. You set your resolution up like 300%, make sure everything else is fine, and then you'd hit export, and it would export it to that spot. I'm going to just edit it here in Photoshop. So the first thing I'm going to do is clean up that grass. I'm going to bump this up to 100%, and I'm going to come down here, and I'm going to clean this grass up. So you come over here to the clone tool, the clone stamp tool, click on it, set your brush to how big you want it just by clicking up here on the brush size and making it bigger or smaller. And then you hold down the Alt, and that will put where you want to clone from. So I'm going to clone from just out here, just across from it, and then I'm going to clone come down, and I'm just going to paint that out. So, and come back over it a couple times if you need to make it look right with something else. And I'm going to just work the edges here. Just come down here. Notice I'm cloning straight out so that it duplicates about the same stuff as I'm coming in, so that it keeps the stuff similar. So notice what I just did right here. I have a duplicate now because my clone tool ran across that. You don't want to get duplicates like that, but I'm trying to mimic exactly the same shades of the area that were there already. And this whole foreground, there's a whole bunch of more grass here in the foreground that is just kind of out of focus. I'm going to just remove it as best as I can. I'm just doing this quick and easy to show you the concept. So I'll go through and just remove, especially in a shot like this, all that stuff that is annoying. Let's come over here and do it. All that stuff in the foreground that's just annoying. It's those grass stalks sticking up, and they're really detracting from the image. And so just pulling them out. There again, watch for duplicates as you're doing this. Something that is, a very obvious duplicate like that. You see, I just cloned from right there, and there's a very obvious duplicate. So come over to another spot. If you're cloning from right by where you're working, or right by where you're cloning to, you'll see duplicates like crazy, and it gets really annoying. And if you get a duplicate, you can just come back and touch back over it. Just clone from another spot and just go back over it again. So just clean it up, just go along and just do that border patrol and just clean up the stuff that you find that's just distracting. I'm just going really quick on this. I would work a lot slower usually and really double check what I'm doing. I'm just trying to give you an idea. So you get that cleaned up. There's one down here that really bugged me. That little black, that's a wildflower that's gone to seed. And this one right here, really just close. Way too close. That's about it. So you just go through and look at the edges and clean stuff up. Another thing you can do is called dodging and burning. So this comes from old darkroom techniques of allowing light to hit an area of the print as you're printing it, or blocking light from hitting the area. Dodging a burning tool is right over here in your toolbar, and it's the burn tool or the dodge tool or the sponge tool. I'm going to select the dodge tool, and then I'm going to make sure it's set on highlights, and you want to work low, a little bit at a time. So I've got it set at 4%, and I'm going to go through and just brush up the highlights in here. A lot of times I will zoom in and work closer, but for the sake of this, I'm going to show you. I'm just going to come through here and just I'm hitting those leaves. I want all those leaves to just have a little bit brighter exposure than what they have. And that's what you're doing, is you're changing the exposure of that area. I'm also going to run along these tree trunks. It'll just bring them up just a little bit. And I'm not doing much. You just a little bit. to bring stuff up. And then just, I'm going to hit some of this tree and just bring up some of it. I'm doing it like a painter would use a brush in a lot of ways. You're just going along, I click and drag, just hitting the spots that I want to bring up. My wife watched me doing this one day and she's like, you're actually painting with light. And I'm like, well, that's what photography stands for. Drawing, or that's the root words of it, or photo, light, and ography is drawing. So it literally means drawing with light, if you didn't know that. So, you know, I'm just hitting some places and just brightening them up some, and then I really want to bring up some of these nice leaves in here. This image was pretty good to begin with as far as the edit on the color and the lighting, the highlights, bringing the highlights up in Lightroom. But sometimes if it needs a little bit more, I'll just bring up a little bit more. The other thing I'm going to do is having layers is really important, and I'm going to bring up this grass a little bit more. Just the highlights in the grass. Layering in a photograph really makes it pop and jump out. So having this a little bit brighter layer here, and then just along the top of those grasses, and then where it gets darker back in there. You can also do a burn, select the burn, and if you want to burn the shadows in an area or the highlights or the midtones, select which one you want, and then you could go in and you could darken some area. You could just just a little bit. I'm just burning the midtones in here just to make some things a little bit darker in the background. And I'm going at this really sloppy. This is just to show you what I'm doing. It also helps a lot of times in a foreground to darken those the midtones to help bring up that layering a little bit more. So let's show you what I did. So you come up here to history, and here's the original with all the grass in there in the foreground, and here is what I just did. So notice the grass is gone, and watch this tree. Watch the main subject is this tree. Watch it. This is what I've edited, and that is the original. So this is the original brought in from Lightroom, and this is after dodging and burning. You see how those highlights just popped some? How it just brings them out and they jump up on you? Watch the background up in this area. Watch up in this area right here. That's the original. You see how those leaves just jump out at you? Come back up here, look up in this area up here. There is after the edit. So that, in a nutshell, is what I would do for editing a photograph. So that is basic editing. Kind of quick and easy what I just did there. I would typically spend more time zooming in and just getting the very specific areas that I want to bring up, light or darken. But Photoshop and Lightroom, or something that's equivalent and that is good, really is important for editing your photographs. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching, and happy trails.